and to make no peace with oppression or the oppressor, and that we may reverently use our freedom, help us to employ it in the maintenance of justice among men and nations. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
All right. Good morning, and welcome to the 16th Annual Roll Call of Nations Wreath laying ceremony. My name is Ken Pope, and I have the distinct honor of serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. So again, thank you all for coming, distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, and thank you to our sponsors who made this event possible, and to all VOC supporters who help us achieve our vital mission. I would like to especially recognize the Honorable James Burnley, who contributed to this year's ceremony as a Freedom sponsor. Today, we publicly honor the memory of the more than 100 million killed by communist regimes, and to boldly remind the world that over 1.5 billion people are still suffering under the yoke of this evil and inhumane ideology. VOC's annual Roll Call of Nations ceremony serves to remind us of the worldwide devastation communism has brought, and to recognize the examples of hope and courage in the fight against this evil ideology and system of rule. Behind the great victories over communism have been many heroic dissidents and activists who made these victories possible, one of which we will recognize here at this ceremony shortly, and many of whom are also here today with us. It is crucial to recognize the contributions of dissidents who put everything on the line, often including their very lives, to oppose communist dictatorships and totalitarian regimes, as we all know now, will only fall when courageous people like them stand up to them. This Sunday is the anniversary of President Ronald Reagan's courageous 1987 speech at the Brandenburg Gate, where he commanded, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." In 1987, as a young Army lieutenant stationed on the east-west German border, that seemed like a very remote dream. But just 2 years later, the Berlin Wall did fall. And we hope someday that the remaining communist regimes around the world will also fall, and we can actually enjoy a world without communism. So thank you again for coming, and for each of your contributions and commitment to fighting against communism. It is now my distinct honor to introduce a man who has dedicated his entire life work to fighting communism and remembering its victims. I'd like to present Dr. Lee Edwards, our founding chairman of the Victims Memorial Foundation.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, champions of freedom. I begin with a question. Why are we here? Well, of course, is to lay a wreath, as you will shortly, and to say a silent prayer for the more than 100 million victims of communism. That's more than all the fallen of all the wars of the last century. So I repeat, why are we here? To remind the world that 1.5 billion people live, and not by their choice, under the crushing yoke of communism. We are here because we hear the voices of the victims. They cry out to us, "Remember us. Remember us." To which we say, we will never forget you. Never. That's been our message since we dedicated the memorial 16 years ago. And no speaker has been more eloquent than President George W. Bush, who reminded us of the innocent Ukrainians who starved to death in Stalin's Great Famine, the millions of Russians who died in the Soviet Gulag, the Lithuanians, Latvians, and Estonians loaded onto cattle cars and deported to Arctic death camps, the countless Chinese killed in the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. The Cambodians, slain in Pol Pot's killing fields. The Poles, massacred in the Katyn forest. The Cuban Balseros, and the anti-communist South Vietnamese who drowned trying to escape tyranny. Their sacrifice must not be forgotten. And so, we are resolved to keep coming back to the memorial every June until that inevitable day when we know that China is free, Cuba is free, Vietnam is free, North Korea is free, Laos is free. Just as the Berlin Wall fell and the evil empire collapsed, we are confident that communism will wind up on the ash heap of history, and all the captive nations will be captive no more. Thank you.
I would now like to invite VOC's chairman, Dr. Elizabeth Spaulding, to deliver keynote remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to serve as the chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. As many of you know, VOC's mission is to educate this and future generations accurately about the ideology, history, and legacy of communism, and to advocate for the freedom of those still held captive by totalitarian regimes. To further this critical mission, 1 year ago, we opened the Victims of Communism Museum to the public. Located just 2 blocks from the White House, the Victims of Communism Museum educates visitors about the history and horrors of communism. It is a center of research on and remembrance for all the victims. As we've heard, and we want everybody to know these figures, more than 100 million killed by communism, and more than 1.5 billion people still suffering under communist regimes. The museum's main galleries detail the history of communism's crimes and the heroic struggles of those who resisted. We also feature temporary exhibits in cooperation with partner organizations. Our new visiting exhibit chronicles an indispensable anti-communist, dissident, Václav Havel. The museum offers an immersive experience including artifacts, interactive displays, videos, and a unique Gulag art collection, all of which communicate history in a powerful way. A central theme of the museum that Dr. Edwards has already invoked is Remember Us, on behalf of all of the victims of communism. Since opening, thousands of visitors have toured the museum, including teachers, students, well-known dissidents, victims and refugees whose stories all deserve to be told, diplomats, and dignitaries from here and around the world. We have hosted many school groups, charter and other public, private, religious, and homeschool. The museum has received major acclaim in media coverage and reviews, both abroad and at home, from the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, to PBS and Fox, to C-SPAN and Catholic World Report. VOC is all about education, to convey the truth about the most destructive ideology in human history, and to help everyone understand the many staggering costs in terms of both big numbers and individual lives. The museum is about the past, present, and future, as we work toward a world without any victims of communism. Please visit the museum or visit again and see the new visiting exhibit. Please help us get millions, many millions, through the doors as VOC hosts more tours, more events, and more collaborations with partner organizations. Please spread the word about VOC's experts and witnesses. Our goal for the visitor experience is that everyone leaves the museum both remembering the victims and rejecting communism. Thank you to each and every person who made and continues to make our educational efforts through the museum possible. Thank you all for coming and for your commitment to fighting for freedom in the face of tyranny. And now it's my honor, here is Ambassador Paula Dobriansky, trustee of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation and recipient of VOC's Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom in 2008, to make our special presentation. Paula.
Good morning, everyone. The Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom is the Victim of Communism's Memorial Foundation's highest honor. It is awarded to those who have demonstrated a lifelong commitment to freedom and democracy, as well as opposition to communism and all other forms of tyranny. Today, we are honored and privileged indeed to present the Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom to Bunchen Tsiang for his lifelong commitment to the people of Tibet, advocating for freedom, fundamental human rights, and democracy in the face of the brutal occupying force of the Chinese Communist Party. In 1951, China annexed, occupied, and subjugated the independent nation of Tibet. In 1960, Bunchen fled his homeland in the wake of the Chinese Communist Party's invasion, and since has become a tireless advocate for the Tibetan people, an ambassador to Tibetan culture, a guiding light to the threat of Beijing's oppression. He has testified before the United States Congress and routinely speaks at research institutions and in classrooms across the United States, calling out the Chinese Communist Party's crimes and raising awareness of the plight of his homeland, the captive nation of Tibet. In 1984, Bunchen joined the Central Tibetan Administration in India as editor of the Tibetan Bulletin, and he also served in the office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala and the Office of Tibet in Switzerland. Since 1995, he has worked tirelessly with the International Campaign for Tibet in Washington, D.C., where he currently leads the Research and Monitoring Unit. A member of the Central Tibetan Administration Task Force on Dialogue with China, Bunchen participated in critical discussions along with Lodi Geri, His Holiness's envoy, and with the Chinese Communist Party leadership between 2002 and 2010. And if I may say, I had the very privilege indeed of working with him as I was in the administration of the George W. Bush State Department at that time, responsible and dealing with Tibet. At the International Campaign for Tibet's Research and Monitoring Unit, Bunchen spreads the truth about China's ongoing oppression of the Tibetan people as he monitors Beijing's racial discrimination, environmental destruction, and nuclear activities on the Tibetan plateau. On behalf of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, we thank you, Bunchen Tsiang, for your indomitable courage, your visionary leadership of the ICT, and your relentless drive for the people of Tibet. While China hides its subjugation of the Tibetan people and the erasure of their culture, language, religion, and history, heroes like Bunchen ensure that the world cannot simply ignore the Chinese Communist Party's crimes. Bunchen Sering reminds us that even in the face of abject tyranny, the animating spirit of liberty is kept aflame in those of us courageous enough to stand for freedom. I'd like to end on this note, and I will invite you to come forward. But first, I wanted to mention 3 of His Holiness' life sayings, because he has many teachings. And Bunchen, I know that you live this to the fullest. His Holiness said, quote, "Give the ones you love wings to fly, roots to come back, and reasons to stay." Quote, "Let us try to recognize the precious nature of every day." And finally, quote, "Where ignorance is our master, there is no possibility of real peace." Please join me in congratulating Bunchen Sering. Please come to the podium.
Good morning. I'm very much touched by what Undersecretary Paula Drobinski had to say about me, wondering whether it was really me that she was talking about. I've been attending this Victim of Communism Memorials roll call every year, but this year I'm privileged to be in an additional capacity, and I thank you all for this. When I was informed of your intention to bestow upon me the Truman Reagan Medal of Freedom, my immediate feeling was that I'm not deserving of it. First of all, just have a look at the list of the past honorees, and my contribution doesn't reach anywhere near any of these individuals and organizations. Secondly, given the nature of modern Tibetan history, it's in the DNA of each and every Tibetan to do whatever we can to oppose the misdeeds of the Chinese Communist Party towards our homeland and people. Under the leadership of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and may I say His Holiness's representative Dr. Namgyal Chödrop is over here, all Tibetans are nurtured in an environment where the Tibetan struggle is part of our daily lives. In Tibet, our Tibetan brothers and sisters are not in a situation to reveal their true thinking. But those of us outside of Tibet are contributing in our respective ways to the fulfillment of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's vision. This is one of the reasons why the Tibetan issue is still being alive, even after 6 decades of occupation under Chinese communist regime. Therefore, I've not felt for a moment that I was doing anything out of the ordinary, whether during my school days, when I first began my activism, or when I was working as a professional journalist for Indian Express, or even when after I joined the Tibetan government in exile, as Ambassador Drobinski mentioned. After joining the International Campaign for Tibet, and my colleague Tenzin Gyatsola, the new president of ICT, is here, in 1995, and in my task of supporting the work of Mr. Lodi Gyari, the special envoy of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and executive chairman of the International Campaign for Tibet Board, I've been fortunate not only to spread awareness of the Tibetan situation, but more importantly, be part of a team that worked on encouraging policy initiatives on Tibet by governments, including the United States. Today, we are proud to see that fundamental support to Tibet in the United States is not only bipartisan, but has been institutionalized through many legislations. We are hopeful that a new bipartisan and bicameral legislation promoting a resolution to the Tibet-China Conflict Act, which is before Congress, will become law soon, so that the US can ensure that the Tibetan people can have support now and in the future. Therefore, the honor that you bestow on me today is really an acknowledgement of the strength of the Tibetan people and their struggle. and I'm very grateful for it. I should point out here that I personally did not suffer any personal persecution under the communist Chinese rule. My parents were among those few Tibetans, as Paula mentioned, who were able to flee to exile, carrying me when I was barely a few days old across the mountain. Nevertheless, my fellow Tibetans, both in Tibet and outside, like them, I too have become a victim of Chinese communism in a different way. Chinese communists have deprived the entire Tibetan people of our identity and sense of belonging. Tibet is more seen as a possession by the Chinese communists, who prefer to call it China's Tibet, rather than Tibet being allowed to survive as a country with a living and distinct culture. On account of the Chinese policies, the survival of Tibetan culture, language, religion, way of life has been threatened, so much so that Tibetans refer to the Chinese communists as Tenda Gyamar, Red China, enemy of the faith. It might interest you to note that the medal, which is named after two presidents, if you look at their story, they came into their administration when Tibet went through significant period of its own history. It was during the time of President Harry S. Truman in the late 1940s when Communist Chinese took over China and then began their plan for invasion of Tibet. In the initial decades of their occupation, the Chinese communists launched a policy of physical destruction of Tibet. This included killing Tibetans considered enemies and destroying Tibetan religious and cultural centers. There certainly are Tibetan victims of Chinese communism out of the 100 million people that you mentioned earlier. By your action today, you are honoring the memory of the 1.2 million Tibetans who, according to the Central Tibetan Administration and Dharamsala, have died under Chinese occupation between 1949 and 1979. This figure includes at least 430,000 Tibetans who were killed in the fighting in the 1950s and thereafter, 340,000 who starved to death, 56,000 who were executed, 90,000 who died during the infamous struggle sessions, 170,000 who died in prison, and at least 9,000 who ended up having to commit suicide. Now, during the time of President Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, Tibetans in Tibet were able to show their resilience. During a short period then, when Tibet experienced a comparatively liberalized policy, the Tibetan people were able to reveal their continued devotion to their faith, their culture, and identity. A subsequent ruthless and far-reaching communist Chinese policy of control, eventually becoming one of assimilation, made such displays impossible. However, I have no doubt that the resilience of the Tibetans in Tibet will continue to be shown in different ways. Today, you are also putting the spotlight on the 159 Tibetans who have committed self-immolations in Tibet since 2009 to highlight the plight of the Tibetan people under Chinese rule. They made the highest sacrifice, giving their lives, even while ensuring that others are not harmed in the process. I take this opportunity to pay my homage to the Tibetans in Tibet, who through their determination and courage continue to stand up to the assault of the Chinese communists. In exile, His Holiness the Dalai Lama adopted far-sighted policies aimed at preserving Tibetan identity and cultural heritage on the one hand, while working towards a peaceful resolution to the Tibetan issue on the other. He established a democratic system of governance for the Tibetans in exile, including devolving his political authority to the elected Tibetan leadership. Despite the fact that historically Tibet was independent, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been looking for a non-violent solution, mutually satisfactory solution to Tibet that takes into consideration Chinese interests too. His Holiness the Dalai Lama escaped to India in 1959 and since been unable to return to his homeland. He'll be 88 years old this coming July. the Dalai Lama continues to be a symbol of the Tibetan nation and people. The strong bond between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan people is the primary reason why the Tibetan Circle has continued to be non-violent. Tibet occupies a strategic position in Central Asia, and it's important that it does not become another flashpoint like the Middle East. It is for this reason that the international community needs to support the non-violent struggle of the Tibetan people as espoused by the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan leadership. But the world needs to be concerned about the survival of Tibetans, not only out of sympathy for the Tibetan people. Tibetan culture, Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, science or medicine has much to contribute to the development of the world's civilization. Therefore, the survival of Tibetan culture is in the interest of the international community. Also, no one in this world desires war and violence. And at a time when we are all concerned with violent conflict, it's imperative that peaceful movements like that of the Tibetan people receive strong support. At this point, may I say that for any political system to continue to exist, it has to be relevant and beneficial to the people. The Chinese Communist Party has failed the people of China, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said it has to change according to the reality of the situation. The Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation has been playing an important role in reminding the international community about communism and its misuse in different parts of the world. VOC is consistent and continue to focus on the plight of those who are being persecuted by the communist regimes, and highlighting of them in the international community is a source of strength and hope and encouragement to those communities. In Tibetan Buddhism, dedicating any positive deeds like this honor today for the common good has an important role in our spiritual practice. So may I take the opportunity to recite a short dedication prayer. I'll do that first in Tibetan and then in a translation in English. Sonam di tamche sibai tobne nyebe danam tamche le kegana chi balap tubai sibe solid door dolvar show. By this merit, may all beings attain omniscience and defeat the enemy of wrongdoing, and may they be freed from these worldly seas, waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. In conclusion, I would like to say that the people of Tibet have not lost their hope despite over 6 decades of communist rule, Chinese communist rule. In 1959, soon after the Chinese communists occupied Tibet, one Indian political leader by the name of Jayaprakash Narayan said this, and I quote, "Is Tibet lost forever? No, 1,000 times no. Tibet will not die because there is no death to the human spirit. Communism will not succeed because man will not be slave forever." Thank you very much.
Before the roll call, invite His Holiness's representative and Bujin's colleague just for a photo, please, if I may. Thank you.
Nhưng cái giữa của mình là ok.
Thank you so much, and congratulations again, Buj.
Thank you, Ambassador Dobransky, and thank you, Mr. Tsering, for your moving speech. Congratulations once again on your well-deserved recognition. We're now wrapping up the first part of the event, and if you please stick around, we're gonna remove the chairs and line up for the wreath laying ceremony. Thank you so much.
long time no see. I knew I'd see you here. Mr. Pastor.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Do you mind if I have your email or your secretary? Because there's events next week on Capitol Hill, and if you're in town, I would we would be honored. Okay, thank you so much. Long time no see. Already? No worries. It goes very much.
All the way up to Canada. Okay, let's go right to here. Great. Okay. Yes. Yeah, it's a little complicated. Oh. Smack it. Yeah, like a karate chop. Aya. Aya. I told you it. Aya. Thank you for trying to help me.
Yeah. I don't take care of the camera.
Okay, yes sir, yes sir.
Yeah.
No, I have to stay here till all the ABs Oh, that's right.
You have to take the foot and knock it out.
Right.
Okay.
All right. You want to do the last karate chop? We're gonna go this way, so they may hit your camera. So I'd go on the other side.
No, I got one over there.
Oh, okay, good, good, good.
Yeah, just click on it. I just put right here. Yeah, they come this way. Okay, I got that one.
We'll ask you to take your camera to that side. We can't have any cameras on this side, just with our setup.
Oh, was that why?
Okay.
I already have another one over there.
We need to move this because we have to set this rope up a little bit longer, and all of our
That's okay. That's fine.
our wreath layers were wearing. Okay, off.
No, I have to take it out.
Dear participants, please take your positions and get ready for our wreath laying ceremony.
Yep.
We will start calling embassies first.
Yeah.
And I will ask my colleague Karina Lipsman, VOC's Director of Government Relations, to step up to the podium and start calling embassies. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It was my the one we gift from my math part to the Air Force Base 20 years ago when it took place. So it's my karaoke shirt. Yeah, true story. My late uncle Jack Cummings, he was a newspaper in Las Vegas. Unfortunately, Uncle Jack died before I actually became an Elvis fan, so they're fantastic about it. And then the original butler actually the top button for the solo of Elvis doing 7 button.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You just give me some room. That's all.
Luke, right? Luke, actually, remember, wow. Not totally seen how, yeah.
This is pop music. It's George.
Once we fill up one row, we fill the row.
I mean, stand next to you, man. Right here.
Sorry? We'll see how.
Good morning. Thank you all again for being here. My name is Karina Lipsman. I'm the Director for Government Relations for the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. And I'm just absolutely honored to be here with you all today as a Ukrainian refugee myself who has lived under communist regimes in the former Soviet Union. So this is very near and dear to my heart. Thank you again for all your support. Please visit the museum, and congratulations to our recipient of the Truman Reagan Award. So with that, I will go ahead and start calling the embassies, and you will come up and present the wreaths. So the first one is Embassy of the Republic of Bulgaria. Embassy of Canada. Embassy of Croatia. Embassy of Estonia.
Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany. Embassy of the Republic of Hungary. Embassy of the Republic of Latvia.
Yeah, July too. Yeah.
Embassy of the Republic of Lithuania.
I like that.
Embassy of the Republic of Moldova. Embassy of the Republic of Korea. Embassy of the Republic of Poland. Embassy of Romania. Embassy of Ukraine. Tekro, Taiwan. the office of Tibet. Delegation of the European Union to the United States. American-Hungarian Federation. American Cold War veterans. American Latvian Association and World Federation of Free Latvians. Belarusian American Association.
Almost done. When you go to the green on Vietnam, then start.
Campaign for Uyghurs. Center for a Free Cuba. Center for Liberty and Reunification. Citizens Coalition for the Human Rights of North Korean Refugees. citizen power initiatives for China. Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. Cuba Decide, Oswaldo Paya, and all Cuban victims of communism. North Korea Freedom Coalition and Free North Korea Radio. North Korean Human Rights Union in the United States of America. Florida International University. Fighters for Free North Korea. Polish American Congress.
One second.
The Albanian Community Catholic Diocese of Arlington, Virginia, in memory of the 38 blessed Albanian martyrs. United Macedonian Diaspora. Korea U.S. Alliance Foundation. The Natasha Foundation. Uyghur Human Rights Project. One Korea Network. Union of Cuban Former Political Prisoners.
You have a car?
Get one out for influence.
I had to go to say hello to him because I've been together so almost 20 years.
He should still be here.
Vietnamese American Community, Georgia. Vietnamese American Community of the United States of America. U.S. Ukraine Foundation. American Museum of the Cuban Diaspora.
Something wrong here. Let's see. Lieutenant.
Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation.
It's 10 o'clock. We start at 10.
No, 9.
Really? Confuse myself now. almost done.
And I would like to also recognize 3 embassies that could not be with us today. The Embassy of the Czech Republic, the Embassy of the Republic of Moldova.
They were here.
Oh, sorry, they were here. And the Embassy of the Slovak Republic.
Thank you, Corina. I would like to also add a few other organizations who contributed a wreath but were not able to attend today's ceremony due to weather circumstances. I would like to recognize Albanian American Council, Greek Victims of Communism, the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice, and that is it. This wraps the second part of the event, and I would like to call everybody to please line up in front of the memorial to take our family photo.
He's in there already.
Squeeze in. There's more room back there. Squeeze. There's some room back there in the back. Okay, a little, especially on this side. There's some room back there in that corner. Yeah, very good. Okay.